lost a ball. Did one of you have a ball? Did one of you have a ball?
Oh, it's out of his bag.
Good evening. I'm Tanya Mashoff, and I'm with our Osage Family Partnership. We are hosting our event tonight. I'm so excited that you have chose to come this evening. I know we all have busy lives, and so thank you for taking the time to be here tonight. I know these topics can be hard and heavy, but I'm very confident that you will come away from this evening with more knowledge, feeling empowered and hopeful for a better tomorrow. Before we get started, I'd like to thank the sponsors that have helped us with this event. COMC has been a huge partner in helping us promote. And then I'd also like to thank Tucker Shuckers, Hy-Vee, Curran and Associates, Lake of the Ozarks Land Title Company, the Alexia Ryan Foundation, and the Zach Curran Memorial Foundation, who have helped provide the free dinner tonight. We have a little video to get started. It'll help give you a little backstory to how we got to where we are today.
My name is Amy Curran. I am a retired high school math teacher who taught at Osage for 22 years. My husband Paul is a 1985 Osage graduate. My sons Zach and Ryan are 2014 Osage graduates, and my daughter Emily is a 2017 Osage graduate. Many of you may also know me as the mother of a son who passed away from a drug overdose on June 16, 2017. That was my son Zach at the young age of 20, just weeks before his 21st birthday. Zach was a smart, active, fun-loving kid growing up who was always against drugs and partying. That was until he started experimenting with recreational drugs and alcohol sometime during his senior year. It wasn't until almost the end of his freshman year of college when we learned of his struggles with depression and anxiety, in addition to his growing dependency on self-medicating with substances. In just 3 short years, Zach went from drug-free to using drugs recreationally to drug addict to overdose. The last time most of the family and friends saw him was at my daughter's graduation party in May of 2017. He was gone less than 1 month later. It was late that summer that the Always Osage Heartbeat initiative was founded with the help of Mike Williams, former principal, and Barbie Snyder Reynolds, and the Osage PTA, now referred to as Osage Family Partnership, or OFP. The Always Osage Heartbeat Initiative started off as an awareness program, but has grown over the years after more alumni have passed from substance use and mental health illnesses. Since 2000, 31 former Osage students have passed away from either suicide or substance use, 28 of those occurring in the last 9 years alone. These numbers come strictly from my own knowledge and memory, but I do believe there are many more out there that I am not aware of. Through the years since my son's drug addiction began, I have done a lot of personal research on the topic. That's when I learned just how closely related substance use disorders and mental health issues are. In August of 2020, Tanya Mashoff and the rest of the OFP officers helped kick off a reboot to this awareness program. It has become more specific and goal-driven to address the topics of substance use prevention, suicide prevention, bullying prevention, mental health awareness, and emotional health awareness. In December of the 21-22 school year, we launched the Heartbeat Hangout Lunches in the library open to all students and staff during each lunch shift. Initially, we used this time to have discussions on how the students can help improve our school climate and update the Always Osage bulletin board display. We also discussed ideas and resources for students to get additional help when needed. In August of 2022, with the help of the high school counselors and OFP, the Always Osage Club for students and teachers was officially formed. We now have Heartbeat hangout lunches every 2 weeks. We've had everything from planning and brainstorming meetings to partnering with the Army National Guard to have guest speakers on bullying and resilience. In addition to bringing awareness to the issues facing our youth today, the club has also sponsored some activities and recognition programs such as Compliment Tag Week and Project Rise. Students in the club have also started an Always Osage Heartbeat Instagram page with uplifting posts. The Always Osage Heartbeat Initiative was formed in memory of all the former students our community has lost over the years. To help break the silence, the families of the following former students would like you to meet the statistics. Justin Keeney, Josh Berger, Zach Berger, Alex Keith, Cody Brown, Zach Curran, Joel Johnson, Daniel Super, Max Lewis, Coralie Bowen Shrema, Anand Torres, Tommy Weber, Alexia Scott, Dwayne Rollins, Donald Hudelmeyer, Patrick Lubis, Diamond Myers, Carissa Gamboa, Joe Homan, Courtney Norman, Dason McNerney, Justin Doss, Courtney Doss Torres, Jeff Hargis, David Anthony LeBoy.
Hello. I just want to thank everybody for coming to this very important community event. I would also like to thank the families that have joined forces with me and sharing their loved ones with us. I know that there are so many more that were not recognized in this video, but these were just the ones that I was able to reach out to and make contact with, and it's a good start. So before our guest speaker begins, I'd like to tell you a little bit more about him. As a parent, educator, and coach for the past 30 plus years, Jim Marshall has impacted more lives than he can count. He travels to schools and communities speaking to students, parents, and other adults about the death of his son Cody and how they too can help others seek help with drug addiction. The mission of Cody's Gifts, a nonprofit organization, is to educate and prevent substance use disorders as well as raise the awareness on mental health issues and coping skills. Please welcome Coach Jim Marshall.
Thank you. Usually I get into telling a story about my boy, and that kind of brings tears. I never started talk with tears, but seeing what I've seen out there and sharing stories with parents who are here that have similar stories to mine, now I'm kind of there already. But I want to thank the Osage Heartbeat Initiative for having me down here. You're one of the most proactive communities that I have been engaged or been around with in terms of trying to figure out how we can kind of diminish this hurricane we're in right now. I'm a 40-year educator, so I love kids. I've taught at the middle school level, taught at the high school level, and finished my last 10 years at the collegiate level. So I've taught from age 13 to age 25. And I think I have a pretty good handle on all those kids' ages and all their behavior. What separates me tonight from anybody else who's got a story? I don't really know. This is my coping. I tell kids we have to have healthy coping skills throughout life when bad things happen to us and we struggle. And somehow God kind of directed me towards public speaking about this because he figured a teacher of 40 years and a coach of 40 years, was the person to do this. I don't know what your faith is, but I've had many godlike moments in the 750 talks I've done around this state where kids come up and pour their heart out. I see several kids in here that have come up after my talks here in Osage High School that have poured their heart out to me. And part of my talk is their stories. And that's what keeps me going, is that this might help somebody. This might give somebody maybe a little bit better understanding to help somebody else or help themselves. Sometimes in my talk, I raise my voice, I get irritated because this does hurt and upset me at the same time that we're losing our youth in such large numbers. You all know that suicide and substance use overdose deaths are not lightning strikes anymore. I mean, I got to age 50 and I never knew a family that had anybody that passed away of a substance use overdose. I've met hundreds in the last 10 years. Hundreds. The statistics that you see that Amy put together and put on the promotion for this event about how many people have been lost in this community the last 10 to 11 years, you're not unlike any other community. This is nationwide. We lose somebody to a substance use overdose death every 5 minutes in this country. So while I'm talking here for an hour, 12 people will pass that woke up this morning and will no longer be on this earth. And by the end of the day, 222 people. And by the end of the year, 120,000. And with the fentanyl that we have out in the streets, you can guarantee that number is only going to double or triple the next few years. I don't like that. We've got to act now, act quickly, and act fast because the odds are against us with what's out there chemically right now. And we must understand, or we must at least study enough to learn that it's not just a kid making a poor choice to pop an Oxycontin. There's more to it than that. It's not just peer pressure like we used to teach in the old DARE programs. Don't do things that your friends tell you to do just because it seems neat. It's more to it than peer pressure. We have a lot of mental health issues going on with our youth today. And I didn't understand that, even as an educator. I taught all the way up till 2010. I didn't understand that a lot of our kids have comorbidities. Now, that's not a term used very often in common conversation, but you medical specialists know that comorbidity means they've got several things going on at one time. 60% of our youth have a mental health issue along with their substance use disorder. And we have finally learned 40 years later after the war on drugs, that's why putting someone in jail didn't work, because we only attacked the substance use problem. We didn't attack the mental health disorder. So when they got out of jail, they were 3 times more likely to use than when they went in. Oh, brilliant solution, right? Let somebody go that their problem that caused them to get into that situation is 3 times worse than it was when they went in. And that's what we did for 4 decades. Try to arrest the problem away. Find every dealer on Highway 44, Highway 54, Highway 63, and let's take it off the streets and get it out of here, and the problem will go away. Has it worked? Based upon the stories that we have in our communities, we know it's not worked. And thank God we have drug courts and we have specialists that are judges now that work in substance use disorders and mental health scenarios. But let's get down deep with the problem and let's connect the scenarios in our culture that are contributing to the loss of life, specifically our youth. Mental health trauma is a top circle. Did you know that 33% of all teenagers will suffer severe depression before they graduate? And if you do know that stat, have you had a talk to your kid about how to handle depression? Are you raising them in a way that they have coping skills that can handle depression? 33%, 1 out of every 3, suffer from depression before age 18. They live in a hard culture. Those boomers out there like me that want to think we had it hard because we had to walk to school 2 miles through the snow and bale hay every day after school, guys, our life was so much more simpler than theirs is right now. Don't kid yourself that you had it harder than the kids have it today. They're in a mental health hurricane right now. And the worse our mental health hurricane gets, the 2 bottom circles increase. During COVID, we got stuck in our houses and couldn't do our normal activities. Mental health trauma went up. What do you think happened to substance use and suicide during COVID? And what do you think happens to those 2 whenever mental health gets worse? They're all 3 connected. I show the kids a cartoon of a 3-headed dragon. One is mental health trauma, one is substance use, one is suicide. And I say they all affect each other, each one of those heads of the dragon. And they have secondary factors such as anxiety, stress, PTSD. PTSD. You know, sometimes when I raise that topic up in a parent talk, some of them raise their eyebrows. It's like, kids don't have PTSD. Yes, they do. Trauma affects any age human being. Yeah, I know they made PTSD up for veterans of war that saw horrific things. And they still do. But a 5-year-old can have it too. And I'm going to tell you several stories of kids that had PTSD and how it led towards some of the poor choices they made. I have kids come up after my talk all the time and tell me about the trauma they've lived through. I've had 5-year-olds tell me that they've tried to commit suicide or they used drugs at age 6, age 7 because of what happened in the family dynamics and the culture that we live in. I have 11-year-olds that come up to me after my talks and tell me about spending time in rehab. 11. I can't count the number of people that have told me that they've tried to commit suicide before the age of 10. Is that backed up by any statistic? Well, read that Center of Disease Control stat. Suicide amongst 10 to 14-year-olds has tripled the last 10 years. Yes, we have 10-year-olds looking for ropes in large numbers. And these mass school shootings that we're having, that's suicide. They all know they're not coming out of there alive, don't they? That's their last act before their life is taken. Anybody who wants to debate or argue that these mass school shootings are not related to mental health, I will stay here for however many hours you want to, and we'll talk about it. We have a mental health hurricane. Kids don't know how to cope in a healthy way because we have not done enough educating. And yes, I'm a 40-year educator, and I'll stand here and blast school districts forever on the fact that we don't cover mental health topics at any age very much at all. I heard a few amens. You want me to back that up? I picked up a health book at the last school I talked. It was a brand new Glencoe 900-page health book. Because you would think that's where we cover mental health in health class, right?
Or how they want to take social emotional learning out of our schools.
Correct.
3%
3% of that health book covered mental health topics or substance use topics. Now, I know that physical health has been the primary catalyst of a health class. I'm a health teacher. I know. And we started at an early age teaching our kids about what good physical health is: hygiene, nutrition, good weight, good choices with our health and our food. And we really, really work hard at that in school, and we work hard at that at home. But we're not talking enough about mental health, whether it's schools or home. And the longer our kids go without that knowledge, the more poor choices they make on how to take care of that problem. Makes sense, right? I wouldn't send a 12-year-old out to buy a car from a car dealer because I haven't taught them how to negotiate with the car dealer. They would get ripped off. I wouldn't send a 12-year-old out to negotiate with a real estate agent on a house either because they've not been educated in it. Well, we're knowing that these kids are going through depression, going through anxiety, going through stress that we can't imagine at that age. And they don't have a bullet to put in the chamber to kill that nemesis because we're not talking about it. Let's normalize the talk, right? Oh, we can talk about COVID all day long about our beliefs, right? Because that's not judgmental. Whether you believe COVID was a problem or whether you believe it was a hoax, we could talk about it though, couldn't we? Why is this the silent, quiet issue that we stand aside and watch these numbers grow, but we can't talk about it because we're afraid we'll be judged?
Well, the less you talk about it, the more stigma there is.
And the less you talk about it, the worse it gets, right? I've never been a guy in the classroom or a teacher or a coach that ever believed we did our kids any favor by hiding things that are tough topics to talk about, right? Whether it's sex or whether it's drugs or whether it's suicide, it has to be talked about and normalized. And you know what else the kids need to know? It's okay to not be okay, isn't it? We're all not okay at some times in our life. Hell, after my boy died, I laid in the basement and stared at the ceiling for 6 months. I wasn't okay for the first time in my life. And I didn't know how to deal with it. And I was a health educator. And I was embarrassed to walk out in the community I taught in for stigma and judgment. So that's what I did. Now, thank God I didn't run to an Oxycontin or alcohol or whatever. And thank God the Jeff City Police Force had a heroin informational meeting in the community, and they asked me to get up and talk because I found that to be my coping mechanism. This is my heroin, people, right here. This is how I look in the mirror every day, knowing that maybe my talk helps somebody understand something they didn't know. Maybe it gives them a little comfort. Maybe they use this information to help themselves or somebody else that's struggling. But we have to address the mental health scenario. Is this school district doing it? You bet they are. You bet they are. They do everything they can think of to make the mental health scenarios better for your kids. They're trying to hire more counselors, which we need many more of. I'm sorry, the old counselor for 300 kids doesn't work anymore. And that's the average in Missouri. Now, how the heck does a counselor get to build a relationship with 300 kids on their caseload? Because the kid isn't going to come up and talk to them if they don't know them very well, are they? We need more counselors and more therapists to build relationships with kids so when they struggle, they'll talk. That's one thing we can do. Another thing is put it in the curriculum. Have a class on this. There are states, actually, that have mental health coping skill classes. They're required in high school and they're required in college. Last superintendent I talked to, I knew their school district had driver's ed. I said, why do you have driver's ed in your school district? And he said, well, you know why we have it, so our kids drive safely, and we say we help make them safer drivers, and maybe we have less fatalities. I said, that's a good answer, and I know that's why you have driver's ed. And I said, let me tell you something, Charlie. A kid dies every 6 hours in a car wreck. They die every 5 minutes of an overdose death. What are you doing to address that issue? And if your parents out there, I'd be 10 times more scared about what's out there on the street and in their school in regards to substance use than I would about them putting the keys in the car the first time at age 16. How about we flip-flop our concern over what's really dangerous for our kids? And I'm not saying skip being concerned over your kid's car and their driving. Yes, do. But how about we give that same concern to sitting down and talking to your kid every night, asking them how they are, asking them how they feel, what their day was like, what they're struggling with, just as much as you would spend time on the streets training them how to drive. Please. That one question, how are you doing may save that kid's life. You know, most suicide attempters, if they live through their attempt, say that if they'd have been asked how they were doing, they probably would have told somebody what they were thinking about, but they didn't get asked. So that continued to make them believe that nobody cared. Show people you care. And understand when people are struggling, it's okay. Got to get through these stigmas. So I'm the guy that wants to quit counting the number of overdose deaths. And by the way, there is somebody that commits suicide every 12 minutes in this country, so it is a problem with our youth as well also. But I'm the guy that doesn't want to read or listen to the numbers and how bad this is. I'm the guy that wants to go up the stream and find out why they're jumping in the water than the guy that drags them out after they're drowned. Let's start trying to learn and teach more about the connection of mental health, suicide, and substance use. We just came into this. Young lady mentioned that the less we talk about it, the worse it gets. You know what? The opposite happens. The more we talk about it, the better it gets. How about we empower kids to feel comfortable enough to talk about their issues with us? Develop relationships. I'm a coach and teacher. I know if the kid doesn't know that I care about them more than who they are as a student or athlete, they don't care very much about what I want out of them either. They only care after they know you care about them. This is the background behind the mental health struggle. We only identify 1% of the kids with PTSD. We only identify 1% of those with depression. And about the same percent actually ask for help. We all hate pain. And kids need to understand, and so do parents, that we need to know that mental health pain is as important as physical pain. I tell the kids in my talk, if you broke your arm, your parent would take you to an urgent care, and you would get that broken arm set, and then you get a cast on it, and then for 8 weeks you would have that cast on, and then you would get physical therapy after they cut the perfect solution, and that arm is good as new after about 2.5 months. But if somebody's broken up here, they don't ask for help, they aren't recognized they need help, or there's not enough help available, so that mind stays broken. Like the 5 or 6-year-old that's traumatized and now is either cutting, using drugs, or thinking about suicide by age 10. When we study addiction, the average age that somebody who has developed a severe adult addiction, when we study the individuals who have come up with a severe substance use disorder, the average starting age is 12. If it starts at 12, maybe we should be teaching this at 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, right? I showed the kids a Sesame Street slide and of a new character called Carly, because in their community section, which Sesame Street now has, Carly has a mom who has an addiction and lives in a grown-up place for sickness such as addiction. Yeah, that was on Sesame Street in 2019. YouTube that tonight, Carly Sesame Street. And she talks about being depressed because she can't live with her mom. You think Sesame Street did a little research and find out 6 million kids live in foster homes because their parents have an addiction? I think so. Now, you know Sesame Street caters to 2- and 3-year-olds, right? So why does Sesame Street all of a sudden think 2- and 3-year-olds need to hear the word addiction, depression, substance use? Because 1 out of 3 families has addiction in it. I'm not talking to strangers. at any talk that I have. 1 out of 3 families has an addiction in it. It's changing who's raising our kids. Foster homes are raising our kids. We have a new term for grandparents. It's called grandfamily. We have 6 million grandparents raising their kids because of this. God bless them. We're not wired at 65 to raise another generation. I have 3 grandchildren. No way I could have them in my house every day. I'm a good man, but I couldn't do it. But we got a lot of boomers stepping up to the plate doing that because of this epidemic. And God bless you. Grandfamilies. Every 15 minutes, a baby is born with heroin withdrawal. You know somebody that works at Lake Regional? Ask them how many babies they deliver with neonatal heroin withdrawal symptoms, where the baby comes out with seizures, migraines, fever. And that's how they start life, is with heroin withdrawal in their body. I tell the kids, does that not tell you how bad addiction is? That a mother can keep using knowing they have a baby in their body? That it wipes out their nocturnal instincts to take care of their young? And I have a story that goes with that. I went to a hospital to talk to one of my boy's friends because his mom begged me to try to talk him out of using. He had been in the hospital for an overdose. So I pointed to his parents and I pointed to his sister who were sitting there bawling, crying, and I said, hey, if you don't care about yourself, look at those people. They're involved in this substance use disorder you have. It's affecting their life. You guys all know that if you had addiction in your family, you all got game controllers to that addiction. We're all playing the video game with our suffering relatives, right? It's affecting us too. And when you lose somebody, it's still affecting you, right? And I said, young man, this is what happened to my boy Cody, and this is how it happened, and you have a second chance. And I said, you want to make your family feel better about this situation? And he cried, and he said, yeah, I'm going to do better, Coach. And the mom texted me an hour later after I left and said, thank you for what you did. I think it meant something. We understand this is a long road. We caught Johnny in the bathroom 5 minutes after you left syringing in the ICU. So for those of you who think this is just a simple, well, I'm going to quit tomorrow and it's that easy of a choice, it's not. We do know the more we talk about this, the better off our chances are. They say if we have great dialogue at home and great instruction in schools, there's an 80% chance if a kid gets to 18 without using that they will never use and never develop a substance use disorder. So our question is, how do we get them to 18? How do we get there? I spoke at Columbia College. Maybe some of you go to their satellite campuses because they're all over Missouri. And they wanted me to share their statistics because they do an exit survey with their students after they graduate. So this is your average college student. 54% of their students said they have experienced major depression. 74% have experienced anxiety. 33% of students have had panic attacks. 45% of students have had suicidal thoughts. 23% have had suicidal thoughts in the last year. And 3% of their students attempted suicide. Now, these are college students. Do you know what the number one death is of college students today? Suicide. Do you know that 1 out of 4 college students takes a prescription pill not prescribed to them? The main ones are Adderall and Ritalin because they have amphetamines in them and keep them up all night to study their tough exams. I had a little girl from Mizzou this fall come up and say, Coach, that kind of makes sense to me because when I came in here and didn't know anybody in my hall, once everybody found out I took Adderall, they came to my room regularly when they had tests. They think the pill is a solution. And every night on TV, that's all you see is miracle pills, right? This pill will solve your heart problem. This pill will solve your arthritis. This pill will solve that. 770,000 pill commercials in the last few years. Now, they all have side effects that they warn you about at the end, but our kids are being marketed to the pill solves everything. And do we have great medical solutions through pills for people? Yes. But we have gone way too far for our marketing and our situation with kids that they think it's okay to take a pill without it being prescribed. Here's another one that scares me. We're 5% of the world's population. We use 90% of the painkillers made in the world. You think we overprescribe a little too much? Why do you think law enforcement organizations have drug take-backs? Because there is a 90% chance when you go to the doctor, that's what you're walking out with is a pill. So we've got to be more cognizant in our medical community about this situation too. More dialogue to kids about the dangerous, slippery slope of using pills. Why? Because 85% of all heroin users started with a pill addiction. They move to heroin because it's a cheaper form and higher power. When they've lost their tolerance to get that high, they move to the cheaper product that gets that high. And it's the same reason they move to fentanyl too. Yes, people seek out fentanyl. They don't just get a bad batch accidentally. There are people that seek out fentanyl knowing it will kill them because they can't get the high from their heroin anymore. That's suicide to me. When you go seek out a drug that will kill you because you can't get your high from the heroin, that's suicide. You know you're going to die, but you don't care. But understand that a lot of times when our kids use, it's not because we haven't talked enough. Sometimes it's because they're trying to escape from the mental health trauma they have. We need more therapists, more counselors, and we need more dialogue about this issue. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit to a few of these. This slide represents the number of adolescents and young adults with co-occurring disorders. That means they're on the substance use spectrum, but they also are dealing with a mental health comorbidity combined between their issue with the drugs. Our teachers have learned a new phrase, a new term. They teach it in workshops. I get to talk and listen in these workshops sometimes. The new phrase is adverse childhood experiences, ACE scores. If you're an educator, you know what an ACE score is. The worse that score is from 1 to 10, the more traumatic that kid has had behaviorally affecting their situations. Kids up there near 10 are darn near, it's darn near impossible to teach them anything or have them in regular school settings. They're that traumatized. I wish I'd have known this when I was a full-time educator, because usually the old coach got angry with kids who made their classroom teaching difficult. That was probably a kid with a high ACE score, a very traumatic background, and all I did was exasperate it or make it worse when I chewed their rear end out. Trauma-informed. And all it does is like kick a Doberman that's been kicked 100 times already that day. What do you expect it to do? Continue to bite fiercely because you've triggered and you've taken them on. As an educator, we have to understand that we need to deal with kids, a lot of them with an high ACE experience. 1 out of 10 kids. I always tell kids, you know what? You got a bunch of kids that walk in with invisible backpacks every day. They've got that trauma, they've got that depression, they've got suicidal thoughts, and you don't see it on their facial expression, their poker face. Or maybe they're smiling just like you are. But we have many, many kids that walk through with unrecognized symptoms that need help, and need help quick. Adverse childhood experiences. This young lady down at the bottom was Christina. Christina was our class valedictorian at Jefferson City High, 2006. She scored a 36 on her ACT. That's 600 questions, 600 right. She came back and said, I aced that. And I said, how do you know? You don't get the results for 2 weeks. She said, Coach, there wasn't one I didn't know. I said, well, you know what? If you get a 36 on that, you get to determine the workout when you get those results back. Just bring it back to me. Christina ran our workout 2 weeks later. She was smart. But she was a kid that wanted to be perfect, so she was on her laptop all the time seeing where she ranked in Mizzou's med class. Number 2 would be a bad day for Christina anxiety-wise. Number 3 might be jump off the cliff day for Christina. We have a lot of those kids too. She started using Xanax and Oxycontin at the suggestion of some of her medical friends, pre-med friends, to get rid of her stress. 1 out of 4 kids, I told you, take a prescription pill not prescribed to them. And the college kids are the worst at it. She got through and she was number 1 in her undergraduate work in physical therapy. Now, Christina had 36 college credit hours before she walked on the campus from all her advanced placement classes. So she was like a sophomore, junior before she even had taken a semester of classes. She graduated from her undergrad at 22 and now was working on her doctoral program at age 23. Usually you're doing that at 28 or 9. This kid is sharp. Simple choice. I'm going to take this Oxycontin and this Xanax to get rid of my stress. Jessica on the left had been in a severe car accident her freshman year. In college, she had a full ride at Missouri S&T, so she was loaded up on Percocet and Oxycontin. Her doctor was quite willing to re-up the prescriptions and to continue at that time. You know, a lot of good things have happened since then. Doctors are a little bit more wary about the Oxycontin issue now than they were back in 2006, 2008. And there have been quite a few lawsuits on the Purdue companies and pharmaceuticals, and now they have restrictions. But she also was taking Xanax because she had an abusive relationship with a boyfriend. So she got hooked on Xanax and painkillers her freshman year at Rolla. The young man next to her, Taylor, was my backyard neighbor. His mom was our counselor at Jeff City High School. He started suffering from depression, did not like how he felt, and was grabbing Oxycontin out of his grandparents' cabinet at age 10. Now, I did tell you the average starting age is 12 for those with severe substance use disorders, didn't I? So he matches up with, that's not a lightning strike. Age 10. I had him in class. Wouldn't dress out, wouldn't follow school orders, wouldn't follow me. And we were friends. I mean, we had a relationship built. But he had some mental health issues. So I saved my boy for last. Cody was by all means your normal kid. He wasn't the athlete in the family like his dad or his sister was. Cody found his own niche and things to do, but very popular young man. Cody graduated in 2010. He had had a brain injury at age 3. He fell off a retaining wall 20 feet high at the babysitter's, and we spent a week kind of praying that his blood clot on his brain would go away, you know, because if they burst, you're done. And he came back, and we thought we had our normal Cody back, but when he went into school, he had learning disabilities as a result of the fall. So, of course, the first suggestion was because of his learning disability and maybe a little bit of hyperactivity, he was put on Adderall and Ritalin immediately. ADHD, right? Pretty common. Adderall, Ritalin. You get a little bigger, little larger size body, give you a higher prescription. Now, that wasn't Cody's downfall. But I'll tell you what was a downfall. The old coach didn't sit down and say, now this is a medication prescribed to you. Don't ever take medication not prescribed to you that is somebody else's. So all that boy knew when he was 18 was, I take Adderall and Ritalin, I take it in the morning and I take it at lunch. So when somebody suggests I take a pill for a problem, why would he have any problem with that? I mean, when we're pushing them down our throats every day and you don't have these dialogues or talk, why is it abnormal? So he's working in a factory at age 18 in Jeff City, graveyard shift, 11 to 7, And he's getting depressed about life because all of his friends went to great colleges and he no longer has friends to be around. We all know 19 can be a tough age, right? It's a big transition. You're not spoon-fed everything every day. You got to do it yourself. So a friend at work said, hey, how about you take this Xanax? It'll make you feel better. So he does. And then one Xanax wears off and the tolerance level has built up where he isn't affected by one Xanax and now it's 2. And I tell the kids, that's like the cigarette smoker that started with 2 or 3 a day and it now smoke 3 packs a day. You build up tolerance. Your body does that. Or like the drinker that drank 2 or 3 beers when they were 14 and can drink a 25 pack at a Mizzou tailgate. We build up tolerance, don't we? Cody built up tolerance. 1 Xanax, 2 Xanax, 3 Xanax. And then once they knew he was hooked, you guys that have been engaged in this, you know once they know you're hooked, you're not getting them for free or $5 a day anymore. Now they're charging you $20 a pill. Cody was, and this is by text on his cell records, Cody was taking 3 Xanax a day at $60 a day. Now he didn't have $60 a day, but that's why my TVs went to the family pawn shop. That's where my granddaughter's DVD went, who I was taking care of because my daughter was in the military at the time. That's where a camera that cost $2,000 would go for $50. And the pawn shop would say, hey, I know this is probably your parents. We'll sell it back to you for like $300 once you get the money. So Cody thought, oh, I'll take that $50, and when I get the money back, I'll go ahead and buy that thing back for $300. You know that never happens. Now, this was a kid who I had lectured the year before he died about giving all of his brand name Christmas clothes to a homeless man. Now he's stealing his dad's TVs, taking his niece who he loved, items to the pawn shop. See, if you know anything about addiction, that thought process of what you're violating or who you're violating no longer exists. And the more that happened, the stronger I got in resistance. You do that again, you're done here because you've lost trust in this family. And that's how this baby boomer's dad raised him. Follow orders, do what you're told, or you can find somewhere else to live. And sure enough, it did happen again, and I kicked him out of the house. Does it look like that worked? As tough as you want to be, as confrontational as you want to be, substance use disorder is not kicked by tough love. I'm here to tell you that 100%. We must love unconditionally, even though the pain and what's going on is terrible. And kicking the house probably only exasperated his problem to a higher level and made him use even more, because a little bit of good thing he had family-wise was now gone. Matter of fact, I continue that story with the kids to tell them how bad addiction is, because the only friend that took him in, and mind you, he had a lot of friends, but they knew Cody's problem, and he had probably stolen from them, so they didn't want him. One person took him in, and that very night that he was taken in, he stole that person's car to buy drugs. Now, that's not very smart if that's the only place you have to live, is it? But then again, common sense and substance use disorder don't run on the same track and the same lanes and the same meet or the same time. Cody moved to heroin eventually. Jessica moved to heroin. Christina, the physical therapist working on her doctorate degree, moved to heroin, and so did Taylor. All 4 of those kids that I either watched grow up from age 5 to the time that they lived to, all moved from a prescription pill to heroin. So it follows that 85% of all heroin users start with the prescription addiction. We've got to be careful about the prescriptions in our homes. We've got to educate kids that that's a no can do and how dangerous it is, and to continue to monitor how prescriptions are handed out. For 10 years, I spoke in the legislature that we needed a prescription drug monitoring program because my boy went to 3 doctors, was prescribed 3 medications, and he went to Walgreens, Hy-Vee, and another grocery store, Gerb's, and played the doctor shopping scheme to a T. Now we have a database. Thank God, Missouri, the last state to adopt one, that all pharmacists and all doctors know what a person's been prescribed if they get on that database and check it before they prescribe. I'd also like to see one step farther. How about people that come in with anxiety, that are young people, come in with depression or come in with trauma? How about we test them before we prescribe? Does that make sense? How about we test them before we prescribe, because we may be just giving another bottle of Percocet to somebody who's already hooked on Percocet. Maybe that'll happen, but that needs to happen sometime down the road. I do a local check on communities. I didn't get to before I came down here, but I do a local check. That represents Cole and Boone County, Columbia and Jeff City. That's the average number of overdose calls they get in a year. Did you know that a firefighter goes to 8 overdoses for every fire they go to? So I tell kids, when you hear sirens at night, yeah, it might be a crime, maybe. More likely than not, they're calling because it's an overdose. 8 overdoses for every fire they go to. That's why they carry Narcan on their belts. That's why Narcan is free to a lot of people from law enforcement organizations. That's why they made Narcan non-prescription now. Do you know they have it in most schools now? I spoke at Columbia Hickman last year. You know why they have it? Because they've had several overdoses in the hallways. Every school needs Narcan. And it's not, I was first kind of skeptical about it. I thought maybe we were enabling people who had a substance use disorder by giving them Narcan. No, it gives them an extra day to get better. So let's quit talking about fentanyl for a minute. Let's quit talking about heroin for a minute. And how about let's ask why the kids have this much pain? It's the trauma they grow up with. It's the culture they live in, whether it's social media, whether it's their phones, whether it's poor parents. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but I do speak my mind. We also have too many doggone parents they shouldn't be having children. They're not equipped to have children. And when that happens, you have trauma. When that happens, you have situations like anxiety, depression, and rough situations for kids to deal with. I love this one when I get parent groups. If you're looking for a curveball to come in from third base to home plate with a big curve on it, I'm going to tell you that a lot of our problems are how we're raising our kids, too. The softer we get raising our kids, the more this problem exists. Our kids need to step outside their comfort zone often. And you need to push them out of their comfort zone. Because when we fail and struggle, we learn how to cope, don't we? You're not born with coping skills. It's your experiences you're allowed to have. So when we have tougher situations for our kids, they learn how to struggle.